Imagine this. You wake to the shrill of an alarm you've hated for years. Your hand slaps it silent on the third ring as always. The room smells faintly of dust and yesterday's coffee. You shuffle to the bathroom, avoiding the mirror, and brush your teeth with the same mechanical precision as every morning. The mint burns your tongue, too sharp, too familiar. On the commute, traffic pulses in predictable rhythms. Red lights stretch like rubber bands. You drum your fingers on the wheel, counting seconds, but time here is a flat circle. At work, you answer emails in a language of hollow pleasantries. Looking forward to connecting, you type, for the 7th time this week. The words curdle on the screen. This is not a bad day. This is Tuesday. But here's the contradiction that will split your mind like an axe. You are alive. Your heart beats. Your lungs inflate. Yet something primal whispers that you've been dead for years. Not physically, no, far subtler. A slow erosion of aliveness, like a tree suffocating under layers of concrete. You laugh at parties you don't enjoy. You nod through conversations that leave you empty. You chase promotions, relationships, accolades, only to find their sweetness dissolving like sugar on a parched tongue. You are a ghost haunting your own life, rehearsing a script written by someone else's hand. What if death isn't an event, but a condition? Philosophers have gnawed at this paradox for millennia. Schopenhauer called existence a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. Sartre spat that hell is other people, but the modern horror is simpler. Hell is becoming one of them. You bleed into the crowd, your edges blurring until even your suffering feels generic. Yet society rewards this death in life. They hand you certificates for it. They call it maturity, responsibility, success. But when you lie awake at 3 a.m., the facade cracks. A voice hisses, "This is not living. This is waiting." Waiting for what? A vacation, a revelation, a coffin. Ask yourself, truly ask, when did you last feel the electric thrum of being unapologetically awake? Not the performative zest of Instagram adventures, but the raw, trembling thrill of existing without apology. Childhood, perhaps. Before the world carved you into a shape that fit its shelves. Recall climbing trees just to feel the bark bite your palms. Recall crying unabashedly over a dead bird, rage burning hot when someone called it just a sparrow. You knew then that life was not a spreadsheet. But now, you've mastered the art of playing human. The great question is not how to avoid physical death. It's how to kill what's already dead within you, the hollowed-out routines, the borrowed dreams, the fear of feeling too deeply. To shed the corpse skin of your conditioned self. But here's the rub: to truly live, you must first let something die. Not your body, but every lie you've mistaken for a spine. This is not metaphor, it's a war cry. Ancient rituals of rebirth. Shamans buried in mock graves. Phoenixes immolating in their own flames. Whisper a terrifying truth. Transformation demands annihilation. You cannot build a new world atop rotten foundations. Yet modernity offers no sacred fires. Only antidepressants, productivity hacks, and the cult of self-improvement, bandages on a bullet wound. So you numb yourself in increments. Swipe, scroll, binge. Numbness feels like peace until you realize it's the peace of a corpse. But what if you dared to reverse the curse? What if the path to vibrant, ruthless aliveness requires a death more intimate than the grave? A death of the ego, the mask, the stories you've swallowed as scripture. The clock ticks. The office fluorescents hum. You're still here, reading these words, which means part of you is already clawing at the coffin lid. Good. That flicker of rage, that twitch of recognition, that is your first breath. The next section will dissect the invisible prison you've mistaken for safety, and why every cell of your conditioned being will fight what comes next. You don't see the bars because you helped build them. The prison isn't made of steel but of ideas, ingrained beliefs about who you must be, what you deserve, and how life works. Heidegger called it Das Man, the they self. The invisible they who dictate your values, they say stability is safety. They say ambition equals worth. They say your pain is a glitch, not a teacher. You comply not because you're weak, but because rebellion threatens the very neural pathways that hold your identity together. Survival, for the human animal, often means trading authenticity for belonging. But here's the trap: society doesn't want you alive. It wants you functional. From the moment you could speak, you were handed a script. Parents, teachers, algorithms, all conspired to shrink your wildness into a socially acceptable shape. Jung warned of the shadow, the parts of yourself you bury to be loved. The artist becomes an accountant. The wanderer marries a mortgage. The fire of your quirks dampened to embers because flames make people nervous. Yet the shadow doesn't vanish. It metastasizes. It emerges as chronic fatigue, unexplained rage, or the gnawing sense that you're living the wrong life. Nietzsche saw this as humanity's greatest sickness: herd morality. We've internalized the values of the mediocre majority, praising comfort over greatness, obedience over sovereignty. The surest way to corrupt a youth, he wrote, is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Your fear of judgment, your craving for approval, these are not flaws. They are weapons, forged by a culture that thrives on your compliance. Viktor Frankl, surviving Auschwitz, discovered a chilling truth. The most enslaved are not those in chains, but those who have forgotten they want to be free. Modernity's chains are subtle: a 401k, a viral tweet, the dopamine hit of being envied. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World nailed it. We're pacified by pleasure, not pain. You scroll through curated lives, comparing your raw footage to their highlight reels. You medicate with Netflix and Ambien, numbing the scream of your unlived potential. The system doesn't need to oppress you, you'll police yourself. But why? Why do we cling to prisons of our own making? Schopenhauer pointed to the will, the blind, throbbing force that drives all life. Humans, however, are cursed with self-awareness. We know we'll die. We know our choices matter. This terror is too vast, so we let the herd think for us. Sartre called it bad faith, lying to yourself to escape the agony of freedom. You pretend your job has to crush your spirit. You call your resignation pragmatism. You swap the burden of authorship for the comfort of victimhood. Psychologically, this is a masterstroke of self-sabotage. Cognitive dissonance theory reveals a brutal truth. When your actions conflict with your true desires, your mind rewrites your desires to match the actions. You don't just sell your soul, you convince yourself it was a bargain. The college student who abandons poetry for pre-med grows to sneer at unrealistic dreamers. The entrepreneur who surrenders her startup to corporate drudgery starts preaching about growing up. Betrayal, repeated enough times, becomes wisdom. Neurologically, you're battling a lifetime of conditioning. The basal ganglia, where habits live, run on autopilot. 30% of your day is unconscious repetition. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, seat of self-examination, exhausts easily. It's why you default to old patterns even when they poison you. Change requires energy, and the system, your own biology included, is rigged against it. But the deepest wound is existential. From birth, you've been fed a lie: you are not enough. Not smart enough, disciplined enough, normal enough. So you graft on personalities like armor. The overachiever, the people pleaser, the cynic. These personas are elaborate distractions from the primal fear that your raw, unedited self might be unworthy of love, or worse, meaningless. Frankl called it the existential vacuum, the void that yawns when you realize you've been chasing goals as hollow as the plastic fruit they resemble. The tragedy is recursive. You mute your pain to survive, but muting pain mutes everything. The poet David Whyte writes, "The price of our vitality is the sum of all our fears." Yet we pay the inverse, mortgaging our vitality to avoid fear. The result, a half-life, a death march in sweatpants. But there's a secret humming beneath all this. Your complicity is also your power. If the prison was built by your choices, it can be dismantled by them. The next section will expose the invisible toll of this psychic surrender, and why your soul's quiet rebellion is the first crack in the walls. You sit in a restaurant surrounded by laughter that isn't yours. The menu blurs as you scan dishes you've eaten 100 times. Chicken Caesar salad. You order reflexively, though you hate anchovies. Across the table, your partner talks about vacation plans. You nod, half listening, already calculating work deadlines that'll clash with those dates. Your fork stabs lettuce, but the bite never reaches your mouth. You're too busy dissociating into a memory of childhood summers, swimming in lakes, skin pruned and alive, until their voice snaps you back. You're quiet tonight, they say. You smile. Just tired. This is how worlds end, not with fire, but with 1,000 unchewed meals. The consequences of your psychic surrender aren't dramatic. They're ambient. A low-grade fever of the soul, worsening by degrees you've learned to ignore. Like a houseplant slowly starved of light, you adapt to diminished states. Your laughter grows thinner. Your curiosity flattens into content consumption. Relationships become transactions. I'll tolerate your loneliness if you tolerate mine. Meanwhile, the clockwork grind of your compromise generates existential debt, compound interest paid in panic attacks at 2 a.m. Or the eerie calm of realizing you'd feel relief if diagnosed with a terminal illness. Cognitive science reveals the machinery of this silent collapse. Status quo bias hardwires you to prefer familiar miseries over uncertain freedoms. Effort justification has you clinging to toxic relationships or dead-end jobs simply because you've invested so much. Your brain, desperate to conserve energy, reroutes every impulse for change into dead ends. You research radical career shifts at 11 p.m., only to default to LinkedIn updates by dawn. The amygdala, your neural alarm system, treats authenticity as a threat. To speak your truth risks rejection, and rejection to the tribal brain feels like death. So you swallow words like broken glass and call it maturity. Culturally, the fallout is catastrophic. A society of half-alive humans creates systems in its own image. You click buy now to numb the void, feeding an economy that devours ecosystems. You scroll past genocide footage to binge cat videos because the alternative, confronting the horror, might shatter the delicate fiction of your control. Social media, that hall of fractured mirrors, turns your hunger for connection into performance art. You auction your attention to algorithms that profit by keeping you trapped between FOMO and rage. Huxley's prophecy fulfilled, we drown in trivialities, comfortably numb as the planet burns. The most insidious damage, you become an accomplice in the murder of others' aliveness. When your coworker whispers, I'm thinking of quitting to paint, you parrot the script, be realistic. When your child cries over a silly slight, you snap, you're too sensitive, teaching them to sterilize their emotions. Each time you police someone's fire, you spread the disease. Jungian analysts note that repressed individuality doesn't vanish. It erupts as collective shadows, authoritarianism, environmental collapse, the rising tide of nihilism. A culture afraid of depth breeds shallow men with nuclear codes. Neurologically, the toll is visceral. fMRI studies show that inauthenticity lights up the brain's pain centers like a Christmas tree. Chronic self-betrayal manifests as autoimmune disorders, migraines, the clenched jaw you carry like a family heirloom. The body keeps score, and its ledger is written in tumors and panic attacks. Yet medicine pathologizes these symptoms as disorders, not rebellions, prescribing pills to silence the very signals that could guide you home. Philosophically, The consequence is a crisis of meaning. Frankel's existential vacuum becomes a cultural black hole. You chase promotions, only to realize you're climbing a ladder leaning on the wrong building. You amass followers but starve for witnesses, for someone to see the raw, uncurated mess of you. Religions decline not because we stop believing in God, but because we stopped believing in ourselves as sacred. The poet Mary Oliver begged, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Modernity answers, optimize it, monetize it, sunset photo optional. Yet beneath this desolation pulses a terrible grace. To see the consequences is to begin dismantling them. The same awareness that makes the weight unbearable also hands you the knife. Your numbness isn't a flaw, it's a farewell letter from the self you buried alive. The next section won't offer band-aids, it will demand arson. The revolution begins with a single, treasonous thought. What if I stopped obeying? Not with grand gestures or hashtags, but in the quiet moments where your conditioning screams loudest. When you're asked to laugh at a joke that degrades you. When you're pressured to apologize for your hunger. When the world hands you a script and your tongue bleeds with unspoken edits. Rebellion is not spectacle. It's the refusal to let your soul be colonized. History's greatest liberators were not saints. They were arsonists of the status quo. Nietzsche, withering from syphilis in a rented room, hammered philosophy with a madman's fury, declaring God dead and humanity unborn. Frida Kahlo painted her pain into technicolor totems, transforming a broken body into a manifesto of ungovernable life. Van Gogh traded sanity for starlight, choosing to see the world as a furnace of swirling gold rather than rot in bourgeois respectability. These were not well-adjusted people. They were cracks in the world's armor, and through them, light flooded in. Your escape begins where all prisons fail, at the edges of control. Start with the body, that traitorous accomplice to your numbness. Dance when you're told to sit still. Walk barefoot on gravel until you remember you have feet. Stop eating what deadens you. Taste the peach like it's the first fruit on earth. The body is not a temple, it's a war horse. Ride it into battle. Next, weaponize your attention. The modern world is a carnival of distractions designed to drown out your inner whisper. Turn away. Let your phone battery die. Sit in a room with no stimuli until your mind, starved of cheap thrills, begins to speak in sonnets. Schopenhauer called this the courage to be bored, the fertile void where genius gestates. But the true battleground is your story. Every lie you've swallowed about who you are, too old, too broken, too much, must be excavated like landmines. Here, Jung's shadow work becomes critical. Invite your disowned selves to the table. The queer child you buried, the artist you called impractical, the heretic who questions everything. Let them howl. This isn't healing, it's reassembly. Societal pushback will be vicious. Expect labels: selfish, unstable, naive. The herd hates apostates because your freedom reveals their chains. When Thoreau retreated to Walden Pond, neighbors called him a madman. Today, we quote him on coffee mugs. The path to sovereignty is paved with ridicule. Wear it as confirmation you're on course. Radicalize your values. Replace success with aliveness. Swap security for sovereignty. Measure your days not in productivity, but in moments that liquefy your edges. The conversation that rearranged your atoms, the risk that left you trembling, the grief that cracked you open like a geode. As Joseph Campbell urged, follow your blisters. Practical steps. Burn the resume. Write one for the life you're fleeing, listing skills like compromise and soul erosion. Then pen your true CV. Survived 27 years of gaslighting. Can identify 14 bird calls. Expert in resuscitating dead dreams. Embrace strategic disobedience. Quit a loyalty that's suffocating you, a job, a toxic bond, a dogma. Do it not with anger, but the serenity of a gardener pruning dead wood. Frankl survived the camps by deciding what his suffering would mean. You'll survive modernity by deciding what your freedom requires. But be warned, this is not empowerment. It's disillusionment. You'll glimpse the abyss where old certainties crumble. Sartre was right, hell is freedom's vertigo. But in that void, you'll find your first original thought. The rebellion's final stage is the most perilous. Let others watch you burn. Your authenticity will threaten every comfortable lie they cling to. Loved ones may recoil. You'll taste loneliness sharper than any betrayal. But as James Baldwin warned, love takes off the masks we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. This is the price and the prize of rebirth. You are now a heretic, a loose bolt in the machine, a question that refuses to be answered. The final section will demand everything. It will ask you to stare into the heart of existence and let it stare back. You stand at the cliff's edge at 3 a.m., wind clawing at your clothes. The city lights below pulse like a dying galaxy. You've quit the job, burned the masks, let relationships crumble that demanded your diminishment. You've done everything the gurus, the rebels, the ancient texts demanded. Yet here you are raw, unshackled, and terrified. Because the ultimate truth is not freedom. It's this: there is no you to save. The self you've fought to liberate is a fiction, a story stitched from trauma, applause, and half-remembered dreams. Nietzsche saw it. You have made your way from worm to man, and much in you is still worm. Your rebirth was never about polishing the statue of your identity. It's about dissolving the statue entirely. The ego you've coddled, defended, and dressed in meaning is the final jailer. It must die, not once but daily. Here's the cosmic joke: you were never trapped by society, parents, or fear. You were trapped by the belief that you exist as a fixed thing, a noun in a world of verbs. Neuroscience confirms it. Every cell in your body replaces itself every 7 years. Your memories are edited fantasies. Your personality, a performance refined by audience feedback. The self is a sandcastle, and you've spent a lifetime defending it from the tide. Let it crumble. This is the pinnacle of all philosophy. Stripped bare, you are not a being but a becoming, a flickering flame fed by the oxygen of attention. When you cling to me, my trauma, my achievements, my story, you freeze the flame into a tomb. The Zen masters knew the obstacle is the path. Your agony of identity, that voice screaming "I must matter," is the final barrier to true aliveness. Frankl glimpsed it in the camps. Those who survived weren't the optimists, but those who stopped clinging to any version of themselves. They became hollow reeds, bending to fate's hurricane, thus unbreakable. The moment you release the need to be someone, you become everything: the cry of a hawk, the rustle of a stranger's coat, the ache of a world too beautiful to bear. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop, and the ocean is thirsty. But here's the rub: this isn't transcendence, it's descendance. A plunge into the mess you've spent a lifetime avoiding, the unedited chaos of existence. Rilke wrote, "You must give birth to your images. They are the future waiting to be born. But first, you must become the womb, dark, formless, annihilating." The paradigm shift. Death is not the opposite of life, it's the engine. Every moment a version of you dies. The child who believed in monsters, the lover who swore eternity, the cynic who mocked hope. Each death creates space for fiercer, more fleeting truths. Rebirth isn't an event, it's your natural state. You've just been too busy building a tomb to feel it. So what remains when the fiction of you evaporates? Only the glance. The unmediated encounter with reality, a leaf's vein, a lover's pause, the silence between notes. This is what the mystics called God, not a father figure, but the act of seeing itself. When you stop trying to survive, you start truly arriving. A homeless man's laughter becomes your scripture. Rain on asphalt becomes a symphony. You'll weep at the beauty of doorknobs, but don't romanticize this. The price is your entire history. You'll forget your grudges. Your traumas will lose their plot lines. Even your epiphanies will dissolve, leaving only their heat. You'll love people you can't keep and release them like autumn leaves. Success and failure will rhyme. You'll kneel in the dirt, defeated by joy, and whisper this. The final truth: you've already died. The moment you began reading these words, the old you started unraveling, that hollowed-out husk you called a self. It was always smoke. The cosmic play is this: life pretends to be solid so you can taste the rapture of losing yourself in the game. So jump, not from the cliff but into the abyss behind your eyes. Let the wind scatter your name. Let the world use you up, your heartbreak, your wonder, your fury, until nothing remains but the electric hum of participation. You are not alive. You are aliveness. And the grave you've been digging, it was always a cradle.